Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Insightful Accountant webinar, QuickBooks Online for Contractors, presented by Alicia Katz Pollock, sponsored by DIVVY. Insightful Accountant is an online news and information source written for small business advisors interested in the latest news and offerings in accounting technology. My name is Emily Hedrick, and I'll be your webinar host. If you have any questions during the session, please enter them in the Q&A box, and we'll try to address them. Everyone that has registered will receive a follow-up email with the handout and recording later today. Today's speaker is Alicia Katz Pollock. When Alicia was just 13, she received her first Apple computer. Immediately, she started designing a database for her father's dental practice to automatically send appointment reminders to his patients. Her passion for computers grew as she did. With an advanced teaching degree, a love of communication, a collection of certifications, and business consulting experience, Alicia is a highly qualified, passionate, and patient trainer. Thank you, Alicia, for being here with us today. And when you're ready, you can get started.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Insightful Accountant, for having me, and especially thank you for DIVVY for being our sponsor today. Today's topic is looking at QuickBooks Online for contractors. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you. And so today's webinar is a follow-up to Gaynor Melke's 2021 strategic blueprint for building accounting from growth in construction niche. And if you missed it, you can find that on YouTube at the URL there. I'll leave that up for a moment. And so she talked about the construction industry and what the expectations are moving forward. And what I'm going to do today is show you how you can do construction accounting in QuickBooks Online. So a little bit about me. I mean, Emily already introduced me, so I'm not going to spend too much time here, but my name is Alicia Katz Pollock, and I am a member of the Intuit Trainer Writer Network. And so I write about QuickBooks Online. I talk about QuickBooks Online. I speak at QuickBooks Connect and Scaling New Heights. I also have my own mentorship program at royalwise.com. And so if you're learning how to use QuickBooks for your own firm, or you need a training partner to help your business owners use it better, I can definitely help with that. I have everything from a full slate of videos to books on Amazon.com. There's one about QuickBooks Online that's kind of like a basics guide. And then I also have a more advanced one for convenience stores and gas stations. I'm also recently the author of Questiva Consulting's QuickBooks Desktop Complete. So I do desktop as well. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to talk about how to use QuickBooks Online for contractors. We're going to take a look at the Project Center and some typical workflow. We're going to take a look at the time and labor costing tools that are in it, how to do job costing, the tracking tools, and project reporting. Now, let me just say before I get started that this is kind of an eagle's eye view of what the features are. If you're interested in learning more about it, I do have a full 2.5-hour course just about this topic. So what you're seeing are kind of the highlights from that one, but I actually go into QBO more and actually demonstrate all of the workflow. So I'll give you information about that at the end today. So the first thing that we want to talk about in setting up QuickBooks Online for contractors or for construction. And the kind of where all of this stems from, I work with a lot of small mom and pop construction shops, and when they come to me, I find them writing their invoices in Word and keeping track of their expenses in Excel, and they think that that works really great until I ask them questions about, what are their best customers and what their profit margin is, and then they realize that they don't really have any true accounting behind the scenes. And so that's, one of the big calls to move to QuickBooks in general. QuickBooks Desktop has traditionally been the go-to for contractors, and QuickBooks Online was more service-based, but they have been putting new and improved features in QuickBooks Online on a regular basis now for, a couple of years. And for some construction companies, QuickBooks Online is a great alternative. Now, if you're really needing robust construction, QuickBooks Desktop is still the way to go, but QuickBooks Online has a feature called Projects and a Project Center. that's not in Desktop at all. And so that's what we're going to take a look at today. And so if you like what you see, you can think to yourself, well, is this a good fit for my clients? If you need a little bit additional from what QuickBooks Online has, but you still like the Project Center and everything that it has to offer, you can take a look at some of the third-party apps like Knowify and Buildertrend, where the construction company is doing all of their management in that third-party software, and then it pushes and pulls the data in and out of QuickBooks Online. Now, as I am presenting today, if you have any questions, please do put them in the Q&A section or the chat, and I'll try and build them into what I'm doing. If I can't, I'll either answer them at the end, or while DIVVY is presenting, I'll answer some of your questions there, but feel free to chime in and get those questions answered. Before we keep going, let's go ahead and get in a participation poll. So Emily, if you would do the honors. So how likely is your firm to adopt new fintech, that means financial technology, that provides better processes for you and your clients' financial operations? Are you very likely to adopt some new workflows? Are you somewhat likely? Are you unlikely? Or it's irrelevant, you don't work for a firm? But when we're talking about fintech, we're talking about all the third-party services that are out there that solve your pain points in your accounting or in your business management. So go ahead and answer that poll. I'll have a sip of my unicorn coffee, and then we'll get going. So while we're waiting for the poll, we have a question in: what's the advantage of using Knowify with QBO instead of QBO alone? So what programs like Knowify or Buildertrend add is the actual project management itself, whether it's allocating your resources like your staff and your materials, or doing some more intricate construction management, like you buy a pallet of wood that's going to be used across several different projects, and being able to allocate those resources for larger job costing. So QBO itself is good for smaller construction, but if you have to do a lot of splitting things out, then taking a look at Knowify and Buildertrend will give you more of a whole complete picture of everything happening on the projects, not just the financial end of it. That's kind of the big goal there. So the first thing that we need to do when you are using QuickBooks Online for construction is go into the settings. And so when you go up to the gear and then to account and settings, go to the expenses tab, and this is where you can turn on the different settings that you need to do the project management and the job costing. So there's a couple different places that we need to go. I might as well go in and show this to you live. This one setting right here that you see on the screen, when you go to the expenses tab, the first thing that you have at the top is show items table on expense and purchase forms. And that's what you want to do if you are either buying materials that you then want to resell, or maybe it's appliances and you want to pass that expense on to the customer. So that it gives you that ability to do those things. It's also great for paying subcontractors, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Item number 2 on your screen, track expenses and items by customer. You need this one on. That's how you do your job costing, where you can see that every expense you can say, okay, this was for that job and this was for this job. And then that allows you to run your profitability report. So you can see not just how much income you made, but how much your expenses were and your cost of goods were for each project. So you can see your profitability, because sometimes you have this big project that you think is going to be your cash cow and you're going to make thousands or millions of dollars from it. And then you realize that your expenses were so high, or your hand holding of the customer was so high that your margin just got completely shot. So it's really important to do job costing on project-based systems like this. You can also see here that you have the ability on step 3 to make items and expenses billable. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on, but that basically means that you're passing an expense on to the customer to include it in their next invoice so that they can reimburse you for it. Now, I do want to go into my QuickBooks and show you the progress invoicing and the Project Center settings as well. So right now I'm in a fake company, Wild Style Construction. Bonus points to anybody who actually understands or remembers the reference to that. And where I'm going to go is up to the gear in the upper right-hand corner and then over to account and settings. And when I'm in the sales section right here, we have a section here for progress invoicing, and you want to make sure that this is on. That's what's going to allow you to take an estimate and then break it up into several stages and invoice the customer. You know, maybe it's 25% down and 50% at a milestone and 25% at completion. Or maybe you're going to invoice them for the design work and the initial buy, and then later on for the appliances. So anytime you're making one estimate and then parsing it off into several invoices, you want to make sure that you turn on progress invoicing. There is also the project center. I'm going to go down to advanced for that. This is only in QuickBooks Online Plus and Advanced. So these features are not available in Essentials and Simple Start. But down here, we have a project center, and I can turn that on, and that's what opens up the project center. So that's where the settings are that you need for the things we're going to take a look at today. And I'll go ahead and say done and head back into the presentation. Okay, the next thing that we need to talk about are your products and services. And if you're coming over from desktop, this is the equivalent of your items list. They just call it products and services in QuickBooks. And you're probably going to want to split things out into your labor and into your materials. So on the slide here, for example, I talk about wall framing. And so you're going to need some supplies and you're going to need people. And when you are if you are invoicing for time and materials, then you need to differentiate the two of these so that you can have it clean and have everything parse out to the right place on the general ledger, that your materials go into your cost of goods for supplies and materials, and that your labor goes into your cost of goods for either subcontractors or goes out to payroll, depending on how you have it set up. But what was I going to say? Just drew a complete blank. Sorry about that. So when you are putting together your products and services, you want to really take into consideration whether you are time and materials or you are just giving an overall bid on the project, that if you're not doing time and materials, you might not need this kind of breakdown. If you're just saying this is how much we're getting for the project, then it can all go to construction income and you're peachy. If you wanted to micromanage your expenses out, then this is where you would start getting splitting these out. You could just call it wall framing and put together labor and materials into one, or consider having them separate. Especially if taxes are an issue, sales tax on your materials, then you might need to mark certain things taxable, certain things not taxable. Okay. All right, so the next thing that I want to talk about is your job costing. And you can actually cost your labor in QuickBooks Online. And it's not just your hourly rate coming out of payroll, but you can also put in your fully loaded labor rates so that you can see what it really costs you per hour that the person is working. And I love this feature, so I want to show it to you live. So where we're heading now is into the project center here on the left that we turned on in the settings. And so I'll go over to projects. And we're going to talk about the project center in a little bit. I'm still kind of thinking about this in terms of the setup. But up in the upper right-hand corner, there's the hourly cost rate. And what I can do here is click on this little calculator. And then I can say, all right, well, I'm paying them $17 an hour, and then it calculates my taxes on top of that. So I'll put in my matching taxes, and then my workers' comp, maybe that comes to about $1 an hour per employee. And then maybe I also want to add a little bit of overhead for managing the project or managing that employee. So I'll add another dollar to that. And so now I can see that even though I am paying this person $17 an hour, it actually costs me $21.60 an hour in labor costs. So I'm going to add that and then save it. And so now I can see that right there, and I'll say done. Now, whenever I allocate that employee or pay that employee, it's going to do the calculations. Now, this has literally actually nothing to do with payroll. That these Hourly costs are literally for your job costing. It does not send this information through to payroll. It's only for seeing the allocation of the time and what that actual expense turns into. Okay, so now let's go ahead and take a look at the project center itself. So when I go into projects, and again, I did that by clicking on projects on the left-hand side. I have some drop downs here so I can see all my projects or just the ones that are in progress. I can also filter it for one customer. Now, these projects are very much like customers and jobs in QuickBooks Desktop. And even in QuickBooks Online, you have the ability to make a customer and a sub-customer. When you turn on the Project Center, it actually converts all of your sub-customers into projects. So that's the same analogy that you want to think about these right here. And I can see the names. For example, my customer Quality Built Construction has 3 different buildings right here. So these are the equivalent of the customer jobs. Second, looking at my Q&A. Right. And what I like about this is I can see at a glance how I'm doing with income and costs. Now, this, of course, is things that have already been invoiced down and expenses that have already been paid. Now, when I want to take a look at any one of these, I can click on it and it goes into the project center for that specific client. I have that same profit margin analysis up here at the top, so I can see the income and the expenses. I can also see open invoices and overdue invoices up here at the top. Then I have 4 tabs across the bottom. The overview is showing me one column for all of the income. And so those are any of the invoices that I've written. I've got all of the different costs, and you can see here that it's been split into my hourly costs, my cost of goods sold, and overhead expenses. And then that shows me my profit margin right here. The next, and all of these are interactive, and I'm going to go into these as I start talking about them. The second tab right here is the transactions. Now, this is really innovative here because this shows you all of the transactions related to this, this project or this customer all in one screen, both the income and the expenses all together in one place, where traditionally you have to go to the customer screen to see the AR, and you have to go to the expenses to go see the AP, but here it brings all the transactions together. So I can see the deposits, the payments, the checks that were written, bills, time charges, invoices, all the money in and all the money out, all together under one roof. And what's neat about this is when I click on Add to Project up here at the top, check this out, I can do invoices and receive payments and expenses and vendor bills all from this screen, and it automatically attaches it to this client for the job costing. Then the next tab is the time activity. And the time activity allows me to see how much labor has been costed. And I'm going to come back around to these in a little while. And then there's a whole reporting section as well. The project profitability reports shows you a P&L for the customer. And sure, you could go make a P&L and then go customize it and put the filter on and see it just for the customer project, but you have to do all that and then you have to memorize it. This just has it all right here with the income and all of the related expenses, including that overhead, all right here in that one report. So there's a couple other reports as well. And again, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So this is the whole project center. And what I do is when I have a client who is using the project center, I train them that this is where they go to do their QuickBooks, that they don't go to the customers and they don't go to the vendors. They come here. That way they can focus exactly on which project they're doing the books for at the time, and then open that up and then put in the expenses or put in the bills from the Add to Project button. And then they think that this is how QuickBooks Online works, and it really works really nicely. One of the questions that we have here is T-Sheets does integrate with the time costing portion. T-Sheets integrates completely into all of this very easily. transactions can also be posted to the project center from the banking feed. And that's just kind of the same way that you always do that. If you have any expense that's in here, let me pick something. None of these are specifically relevant, but let's just pretend. So there is a customer project field in the bank feed that allows you to allocate specifically to any one of the projects. So, I was just looking at, let's do Frank Smith's bathroom remodel. So I can say that these expenses went to that, and I want to make it billable as well. Okay. Now, there's another question here. The profit and loss by project can include suppliers and vendors' names. You don't want to put your vendor names in your general ledger. You don't want your expense accounts to be named by vendor, but all the other reports that are just part of QuickBooks Online can all be filtered by vendor. So you can do all the normal things that you would do, but you don't want to see vendor names. You want to see purposes of expenses in your profit and loss report. Okay, so I just went through the different navigations, and we went through the project view. And so when you are turning on the project center, your QuickBooks will ask you, do you want to convert all your existing subjobs into projects? And you're welcome to do that. It is a one-time shot, so you have to turn it on and start using it after that point. You can also start a new project from scratch anytime. Do know that when you are converting your existing sub-customers over to projects, it is only one level deep. So if you have a customer with a sub-job that has sub-jobs, those sub-jobs are not going to convert. It's only going to be your first level. One of the limitations also, though, is that there's only one address for a project and for the project, and it's the customer's address. So at this time, you can't have let's say the construction company that you're contracting for as the customer, and then their subjobs with different addresses for each location. That's a limitation right now, but please, please, please put in feedback about that, because it's something that I need, and I'm sure you do too. Okay. So let's take a look at some of the workflow involved. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate all of this. If you want to see this really in depth and going through a whole project, I have a course specifically on projects and job costing at royalwise.com, and I'll give you a discount link to that later on. So I'm just going to kind of talk through all of this part. So the backbone of this whole thing is estimate. So estimate is when you you scope out a job, you figure out how much it's going to be for your different line items. Estimates are non-posting. It's just the document that you give to the customer so they can accept the bid on the job. And then you can convert it to invoices. Like I said, you can do all at once, or you can do progress invoices where you just invoice for certain stages. Do remember that if you put in an estimate and the customer never gets back to you and you don't take the job, do be sure to go back into your estimate and change the status to rejected, so that you're not looking at this gigantic list of estimates. And what that looks like is, if I was in, for example, the sales center, you have a box here for estimates, and what you want to see here under your estimates are just the true estimates that are really pending, either jobs that are in progress or bids that you have out that you're waiting to hear back from. If you find that you're not going to do the job, definitely go into the estimate and change the status from pending to rejected to get it off of that list. And the reason why I say that is I have many clients who have like 15,000 invoices totaling $15 million. And there's no harm done. They're non-posting. That doesn't show up on your reports, so that's not an issue. But it's nice to see actually what's really happening in the company. I also want to point out that there is a mobile app that works with QuickBooks Online. So you can go get the mobile app, and then you can actually have your service people out in the field out there with an iPad and putting the estimate together right on screen. And there's even a place where the customer can approve it and get a signature with their finger right there at the time. And so this is a big savings for a lot of people, because if they're sitting out there with a piece of paper and writing it down, then you have to take it back to the office and convert it into an estimate and then send it to them. So this allows you to just immediately get that workflow going so that the estimate can be already in the system in one step before they even drive off from the work site. And you can send it as an email to the customer. One recommendation that I do make is that if you have a complex estimate and you do the same kind of jobs over and over again for your company, what you might want to do is make one estimate that acts as a boilerplate or as a template. And so, for example, I have a customer who has an estimate for their bathroom remodels and an estimate for their kitchen remodels, and they've saved them as recurring with all the different line items that they're going to need. And then they just go into the recurring items and open up that estimate and then take out lines they don't need, modify the description so that they're specific, and then put in the dollar amounts for that particular job. But that keeps you from having to start from scratch every single time, because you don't want to overlook any of your fields. So this is one of Alicia's hot tips for being effective with your QuickBooks and saving some time. Now, when you want to create your progress invoices, when you open up the estimate, there's a create invoice button, or if you're looking at the estimates on a list, you can just go over to the right-hand side and say create invoice. And it gives you, the progress invoicing gives you the option of invoicing the whole estimate at once, or a percentage of every single line item, or you can pick specific line items off of the invoice. So and this works just like desktop. There's no difference on that. And then there are some reports so that you can see the progress on it. There is an estimates and progress invoicing summary report, like you see here on screen, where it shows you what the estimate is, how much of it has been invoiced, what percentage has been invoiced, and what the balance is. So that report is always right there for you. But something else that's also pretty cool, let me go back into it. I'm going to open up one of these estimates, and oh, nothing's been invoiced on this one. Let me go back into my project center, and let's go into Gary Weisinger. And I'm going to go into my transactions. Let me go find an estimate for you. So you can see it happening in action. Open estimates. Let's go to any estimate. Okay, and so the estimate here is going to, I'm not able to find anything. That's why. Sorry about this, I don't usually have this problem. I'm in the file all the time doing different things. And so sometimes, let's take the filter off for 365. All right. Anyway, there will be a field on here showing what percentage of your estimate has been invoiced, so that you can just look at the invoice and instantly see how much is left on that particular estimate. Okay. When you take your payments, just like normal, you can take a payment in full, you can take a partial payment on an invoice, or your customer can pay you for several different invoices. That's just like normal in QuickBooks Online and Desktop. You also do have the ability to send statements, so you can send your statements for balance forward, open items, or transaction statements, so that it's easy to summarize the project for the particular client. For change orders, there is no change order feature like there is in Desktop. However, the different ways that people will do it. Some people will edit one of their estimates and add additional lines down at the bottom. And then you can use the audit log in order to see what changes were made in the history. And so that the audit log reports can serve as a summary of change orders, or others will just create a new estimate for the additions so that you can see the stages of the project. Either way is completely fine. So now let's take a look at the time and labor costing and how that plays out. The time and labor costs are collected in QuickBooks by using the timesheets or by using T-sheets. And so you can do a single time activity or a whole weekly timesheet in order to collect the time. And you can see here that you can allocate it to the particular customer, and you can say it was from this time to this time. Or if you use the whole weekly timesheets, that's up under the new button under weekly timesheets right here. And when you do the weekly timesheet, you can see here that you can allocate to each of the jobs and what it was for, and even who did it. So here's the employee. And then you come in and you say, I worked this many hours on this day and this many hours on this day. And so you can split it up between all the different jobs. So this allows you to control the labor costs. Then all of these statistics here are what flows into the labor reports. When I want to see that time, and here's how it shows up in your QuickBooks Online. So I'll go to the time activity tab right here, and you can break it up either by month, week, or by service, and also by employee. So if I look at this week right here, I can see who worked, what their total time was, and I can even open that up and see which services they were providing for that time. And then that gives me my fully burdened labor rates. I can also group this instead by service. And if I do it by service, it's the same list, but now I'm doing it by what was actually done. And then I open it up and I can see who did the work. And then all of that time activity is going to flow onto the project reports for the labor part of it. Again, it doesn't affect payroll at all. This is just showing you what your job costs are for your time. So now let's take a look at the job costing piece of this. Whenever you create an expense, we turned on the settings in the beginning that allow us to have an items line as well as the categories. If you're used to desktop, you're used to them just being side by side, where you're looking at the account versus the item. Here, they're just above and below. And so what I really recommend that you do is when you do have costs, instead of putting them in the category detail, which only allows you to just write it off to cost of goods labor or cost of goods supplies and materials, here you can get additional reporting by actually buying the service or the product that you are selling. So for what that means is, for example, if you are a contractor and you have a job to paint a house, you're invoicing the customer for that painting. Then when you are paying the subcontractor to do the painting, what you should do is put the painting in this box down here. Then that way you can see not just the income from the painting, but the expense associated with the painting. So you can see the profit margin on the painting itself. So I'm a big fan of doing it this way. The one drawback to this is you can't do this from the bank feed. You have to actually make the expenses themselves, whether it's paying the contractor or writing a check or a credit card expense, whichever way you do it, you have to actually build it here. From the bank feed, you can only put it to cost of goods. You can't say what the product was. So it does create extra elbow grease. It's going to take you a little bit more time, a little bit more effort. But for those of you who really like reports, this is the way to get that essential information about the profitability by service. And so this is what it looks like when you are assigning expenses to a customer in the bank feed. kind of showed you that a little bit already. Let me, and so when you are doing the expense in the bank feed, you can mark it as billable to the customer. Or if you are, let me go back to that previous slide. If you were doing it to the customer, you can also assign it to the customer project right there and make it billable. Now, making it billable specifically means that you are going to invoice the customer for that expense. So it's only billable if you are doing time and materials for reimbursement. If you just have costs that are part of the job, you don't mark things as billable. And in fact, one of the mistakes that I see people make, let's go back to that sales area, is that when you look at the grid right here, you see this blue box for unbilled activity. These should all be pending expenses that are waiting to be reimbursed by the customer. One of the problems I see coming with people converting over to QBO from desktop is that the business owners have been marking everything as billable the whole way through, thinking I'm billing for it, not I'm getting reimbursed for it. And so I've had clients that I come over and there's millions of dollars in unbilled expenses in here. I do have a secret link for it. When Chad is talking about DIVVY, I will put it in the chat for you, but it's a way of clearing out all of that unbilled activity. And it's not a menu item in QuickBooks. It's kind of a backdoor link. So I'll share that with you a little bit later on. But in any case, that's how you then assign your expenses to the customer for the job costing. So here's marking billable. Again, it's only for invoicing the customer for reimbursement, and there is a report in the project center so that you can see that unbilled time and expenses so that you know how much you have pending and can take that into consideration for your budgeting. When you are billing your customer for time and materials, you are including it on your next invoice. And what happens is when you make the invoice, a drawer is going to open up on the right-hand side with all of your unbilled expenses for that job and your estimates and anything that could be included on an invoice. And then you click add, and it puts all of the expenses on the invoice. If you have markup set, it will include the markup, and that markup is invisible to the customer. All it will, if you have your markup set at 20%, it'll take whatever your expense was, increase it by 20%, put it on the invoice. If you are in one of those situations where they actually want to see the markup broken out for auditing purposes, you can display it if you choose. So let's take a look at some of the tracking tools that are available to you. So you do still have the ability to use classes if you want to. And traditionally, that was how job costing was done in construction, was by making classes. The Project Center is replacing that ability. And one of the reasons that that is a benefit is that QuickBooks Online Plus has a maximum of 40 classes. And then after that 40 classes, you're topped out. You could go upgrade to QuickBooks Online Advanced, where you do have unlimited classes. But if you were using classes for this job costing purpose, switching over to the Project Center frees you up to use your classes for something else completely. So it's almost like classes is a workaround now compared to using the Project Center itself. If you are using classes, you do have the ability to run a profit and loss by class in the same way that you have the ability to run the profit and loss by job. Now, there is also a need for budgeting sometimes. When you're trying to put together that estimate, sometimes it's helpful to use the budgeting tool and create a budget in QuickBooks Online Plus or Advanced. And then that way you can still do your budgets versus actuals, as a corollary to doing it inside the estimate. Now, for complex projects, the budgets are still not really enough because you need to really, get on a line by line granular list before you know what that total is to put on the estimate. And so there's still a need either to use Excel, or that's where Knowify and Buildertrend come in, because you can actually spec out the whole job on a, equipment rental by equipment rental basis, or, every single supply that you're going to need. And then you transfer those totals into the budget or into the estimate. And then the reporting. So like I said, there is, let's actually go into the Project Center for the reporting part. And when I head into projects and go into one of the projects, I have my project reports right here. So again, there's the project profitability, which is really is a P&L filtered for the project. So you can see all of the income. You can see all of your cost of goods. You can see all of your labor costs. And and then any overhead expenses that were allocated to the project. And this does not include the time costs, because again, the time costs are, unless you're doing it through payroll, that's where it would hit this. The time costs themselves are only allocated through this time activity right here, although they are included in the overview. You can see the hourly time costs here. So this number here is not actually on the P&L. The other reports you have, you can do your time cost by employee or vendor. And so here you can see your reports by each of your employees or your subcontractors to see how long they worked and what their total cost was, and break it out by the actual line by line item for what they did from, again, coming from the timesheets. And then the last report are your unbilled time and expenses, and that's the same as that blue box that we saw up in the sales area. And so this is anything that was marked billable that's waiting to be invoiced, whether it's time or materials. Now, there are additional reports that you can run. QuickBooks Online Plus has hundreds of different reports that you can run and then further customize. I'm really fond of the income by customer summary report. It's one of my most used reports. And what that does is it summarizes all of the income from the job, all of the expenses from the job, and gives you your net income for the job or your profit on that job. And so that's how you make that determination. Wow, I made a lot of money from this client, but I didn't make any profit. So it's really instructive for a lot of my clients who, they want to give the client lots of discounts because of the scope of the project, and then they realize that they just gave away their margin. So this is really helpful. You can do the same reports by sales of product or services, where you can see all of the income that you made from that product or service and all of the expenses from that product or service. You can see how popular it was, like what the quantity of them were, and what the percentage of compared to all the other things that you do. So if you're trying to find out what your most popular services or products are, the sales by product or service report is great for that. Okay, I want to go ahead and take some of your questions, and then I will turn it over to Chad. So give me a moment to skim. There's been a lot of questions coming in. Somebody asks again about payroll and T-sheets. You don't have to be using payroll in QuickBooks in order to integrate T-sheets with your QuickBooks. So you can do your payroll outside of that. Somebody asks about marking billable options. You don't do that with estimates. That's happening on the expenses themselves, that when you incur the expense or you write the bill, that's when you mark things as billable. The project profitability report, that's the one that is this one right here. This one does not include the time costs, because those are not actual costs. Your actual costs are coming from the expenses when you pay the subcontractor or from your payroll. So at that point, if it's been allocated to the customer, it will show up here. But the overall time costs are kind of just a measuring stick for you to be able to see how much expense went into it. Somebody asked about estimates on an iPad. Yeah, the estimates, if you're using an iPad and you're using the app, anything you do on the app is live in what's happening on your computer. The one drawback is that you can't start a project in the app, and I don't know why that is. So if you know that you are going to be doing work on site on a project, you actually should on your computer, or maybe just in the browser on your iPad, you can log in through through Safari, create the project there, and then when you're in the iPad app, you can go ahead and allocate the expenses to the project. So there is a limitation right there. So the project center only works for the sub customers. So you would have to make the customer and then make the project underneath that customer. But it all shows up. What's kind of nice about this is that when you do look at your customers list, you don't see all of the sub customers projects or sub customers or projects there. So we've been working with Gary Weisinger. We don't see all of the sub projects here. So but when I go into him, then I can see there's a new projects tab under the customer that shows me all of their different projects. So that's kind of the workaround for that. Somebody asked, can you restrict a user only to work in projects? The way that you would do that, I mean, it's kind of limited, but it depends on which version of QuickBooks Online you're using. If you're in advanced, then you have more granular ability to specify what they can or can't do. For somebody who you want to be able to do projects, you would give them standard user ability and then specify that you only want them to have customer access, and that will allow them to do the estimates and the invoices. If you want more refined than that, going up to QuickBooks Advanced would have some more features for setting up your users. Okay, what else do we have? Okay, I think that is pretty good. I know that some of you had questions that I haven't been able to answer in the scope of today's workshop. And again, this is just kind of an overview of where things are and kind of how it works. But if you would like to see it really in action, like really nuts and bolts, hands-on, how to use the project center, do the progress invoicing, and get the job cost reports, this is my course on my website. So if you go to, it's a shortcut for RoyalWise, royal.ws/QBO_projects_IA for Insightful Accountant, which lets me know that you came here from this webinar today. It is case sensitive. So that's the trick with this one, is that you have to have the capitals in all the right places. So capital QBO _underline capital projects _capital I capital A. And as an added incentive, if you use code IA10 for Insightful Accountant 10, you can get 10% off this course and any additional courses that you want to take from my library. My projects course is $59, and it's a 3-hour course with broken out into all the different videos, so you can watch the whole thing or just jump to the different parts that you need. Now, find me at royalwise.com. I have a Facebook group called Training for QuickBooks Users, which is all about training events like this one. And I'm on Twitter as well. And you can download all of these slides as well. Emily will make them available to you. So I want to talk a little bit about DIVVY before passing this over to Chad. That one of the services that DIVVY offers is the ability to have dedicated credit cards or expense cards, really, for your contractors and for your employees. And so if you have contractors who are out in the field and they need to, fill the tank on the truck, or go to Lowe's or Home Depot and go get supplies, or go to the building center, you want them to be able to charge that stuff, but you don't want the risk of having credit cards out in the world. And so one of the features that DIVVY has is the ability that every person can have their own card, but you have the ability to turn it on and turn it off. and allocate how much money they can spend. So you can put spending limits on it, and you can even specify where they can spend the money. Like they can spend it at gas stations and fast food restaurants and home building centers, but they can't use it on Amazon.com. So you can specify where the costs can be allocated. So I'm going to turn this over to Chad, who can then tell you a little bit more about DIVVY. So thank you all for your time today, and I will see you in the next class.
Yeah, well, thank you, Alicia. We appreciate the very informative webinar. It's interesting. I always kind of judge interaction in the chat and the questions box by, just to see how engaged people are and what the content value is. And I am hard pressed to have found another webinar on Insightful Accountant that's had this many questions in chat come through. So thank you for some great content, but also fielding all of the discussions that have taken place. I'm going to share my desktop here. Give me just 2 seconds. It was a great introduction that you just gave, Alicia, and we appreciate the chance to be here. If you've ever attended another Insightful Accountant webinar, you know that DIVVY is a pretty active sponsor of these. And the reason is exactly what Alicia just said. We're trying to challenge a lot of the common assumptions of what expense management and financial technology can do, whether you are managing finances on behalf of your own company or if you are an accounting firm and helping your clients do that. This is a story everyone here may know. If we all had webcams on, we'd probably see some universal head nodding here. But to paint the situation, you have, say, a month budget for either your company or a client's company. You're looking to close out the books at the end of the month, but typically that involves a lot of back and forth with individuals chasing receipts and categorizing transactions and all of the month-to-month manual work that is waiting for you, in order to close those books. And really, we want to solve this with DIVVY, right? We look at that problem, that red line right there. We look at that as a technology problem and not necessarily a process problem. So DIVVY is taking an approach of looking at financial technology and unifying all of the individual moving pieces together into one. So we are essentially a corporate credit card that is paired with a very robust and powerful suite of financial software. So here's what we do. We unify the financial tech landscape. So we will replace corporate and virtual credit cards and pair that with really powerful expense management technology that allows you to do some really cool things, like Alicia was saying, allocate certain budgets to certain individuals, all the way up to empowering your employees to upload receipts at the point of purchase. We'll talk about a few of those things in just a moment, but we also have travel portals, accounts payable and bill pay, and all of this is really designed to help enhance the information that you're feeding to systems like QuickBooks Online. So again, unifying the financial tech landscape. We kind of say this tongue in cheek, but we call it tech to end financial babysitting. Again, every month you probably don't like, talking to your clients or talking to your employees to try to track down receipts that are missing. All of this stuff is very time consuming. And again, it's a question that technology can answer. So DIVVY allows you to see all of your clients or all of your employees' transactions in real time and get complete, clear visibility on all company spend in real time. And then really put the onus of things like receipt capture and categorizing transactions on the people who are actually making the transactions. So expense and reconcile in real time. This, of course, is a course about QuickBooks Online. And guess what? We have a very robust integration with QuickBooks Online. So our unofficial mantra here is swipe to books. So the moment one of your clients, whoever has a card over there, swipes the card, you will get to see it in both DIVVY and QuickBooks. And when we say real time, we really do mean real time. Because DIVVY is an all-in-one platform, it's not like we're having to rely on different systems to talk to each other. When the credit card is swiped, the transaction is categorized and and done in DIVVY, then boom, you see it both in DIVVY and QuickBooks. To circle back to what Alicia was saying, one interesting thing when you control both the spending mechanism, aka the credit card, and the software around that spending mechanism, you get some really neat things that you can do. And one of the biggest ones is actually building enforceable budgets. So say you have clients or maybe individual contractors that you work with, and maybe you've had a problem with those people going out of budget on their spend or not spending in the right places. Well, this is something that is now 100% within your control. Absolute adherence to budgets and spending is something that DIVVY allows for. It allows you to build enforceable budgets, assign those amount to individuals or departments or projects, however you want to divide it up and allocate it. You can now do this and see how spending stacks up against the allocated numbers in real time. You can not only see what's spent, but what has been spoken for and assigned, and then what remains from those individual budgets. We have reimbursements for anybody who does need to spend money on personal cards or cash. So say like tips at a restaurant or maybe gas. There's a number of things that go on personal cards oftentimes. We have a light bill pay portal. So if you're using bill.com or want to be, we have a very light version of that available. Travel portal. So if your team does a lot of travel, you can now build enforceable budgets, although I realize that that's somewhat less nowadays when we have a pandemic here. But the best part about DIVVY is it is completely free. So if you're using other expense management software pieces, other corporate credit cards, and you're paying a lot for this and you don't really trust the whole entire team with or your clients to have these credit cards, check out DIVVY, because not only is the software component and the credit card component much better, but it's also completely free. Better yet, we have no contracts. So there's nothing that keeps you and your clients or your employees beholden to using this if it's not working amazing for you. We only have one very small paid feature. It's our reimbursements portal, but everything else that you've seen is completely free at no obligation. So why are we here at Insightful Accountants sponsoring this? Well, hopefully that's pretty obvious, at least from a function perspective. But for many of you who are an accounting firm that services, the construction space, and you have clients that, need expense management software, we have an excellent partner program, meaning that you can come in as a DIVVY partner, as an accounting firm, as a CPA, as maybe even an outsourced CFO, if there's a handful of you on this call, and partner with DIVVY for a very, very tightly aligned relationship. The idea is that we can help get you up to speed on DIVVY and become basically another expert in a financial technology system to make your firm more marketable. But also to grow your business offering from your existing client as well. I'll skip a few of these, but the very bottom one there, we also have revenue sharing. So if you refer any of your clients and they start using DIVVY, we hope that it is a better experience for both them and you, and we're confident that it will be that. But any of their spend, you'll also get a percentage of. We give you revenue sharing. So how is DIVVY completely free? That's a great question. We earn money off of the interchange fee from MasterCard. So again, it's a performance thing. We have to be giving you and your clients or your employees the best possible experience on a financial expense management platform, or else we don't earn any money. It keeps us beholden to giving you the best experience, and you can be rest assured that it is both free and no commitment on your end. Check us out. Go to getdivvy.com/partners or hit me up via email, chad.waite@divvypay.com. You're more than welcome to view that too. In the meantime, we're going to run our second poll for any of you who are CPAs or accounting firms. What is the most common accounting software that your clients utilize? Or your company, what do you use if you are not a CPA, but you're managing the finances internally here? And with that, I'm going to take a look at some of the questions while we're answering that question here. Let me pull up the Q&A. Does DIVVY integrate with Knowify? No, but we are actively working on APIs to be able to do things like integrations like that. So that's a great question. No integration with Knowify as of right now, however. Looks like there were a couple more chats. Let me take a look at some of those. Okay, it looks like that was all for Alicia. Again, Alicia, excellent presentation. So much feedback coming through on the questions and the chat. So appreciate all your time, and thank you all of you for responding to that poll, as well as taking the last hour of your day to join us here and learn from both Alicia and see DIVVY in action here. Emily, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Chad. Alicia, great presentation. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. As Chad said, everybody was very engaged. It was a very engaging webinar. So thank you so much, Alicia. Great presentation today. I will get the handout, the presentation, and the webinar recording here to everyone later today. And other than that, we hope to see you all at the next Insightful Accountant webinar. Hope you have a great day. Thank you.